Takeaway number 6. It's time to buy stock in little old Clemson. And remember, Dabo Swinney said this last year on the heels, I believe it was a win against Notre Dame. They were 4-4 at the time. They beat Notre Dame. All of a sudden, they're 5-4. And he said, if Clemson's a stock, you ought to buy it right now. Well, yes, Clemson did not look good in their first game against Georgia in the second half. That's an important caveat because everyone looks at the final score and they say, oh, well, Georgia won the game by 31 points. Totally accurate. That happened. Won't push back on that. I called the game. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. I saw it. But I did see a Clemson team that battled for the better part of the first 30 minutes. I also saw a Clemson team that was way too conservative. If you're playing Georgia, man, you got to throw haymakers. Like, if you're going to try to beat them in a tug of war, they're probably going to beat you. But if you all of a sudden want to start, taking shots downfield and trying to challenge one-on-ones, and you're going to be aggressive by pushing it downfield, that's how you're going to beat Georgia. You can't beat Georgia by going 4 or 5 yards in a cloud of dust. They're too talented. So you're going to have to create chunk yardage. And guess what? Man, after week 1, Clemson went back to the drawing board and they said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We are now going to start taking shots. Like, who cares? If we go down, we're going down swinging. We're going to start airing it out. We're going to use quarterback run. We have talented wide receivers with speed. We're going to just try to throw it over people's heads and let's just see what happens. Well, you know what's happened the last couple of weeks? It happens against Appalachian State, and you're like, oh, it's Appalachian State. Happens against NC State, you're like, all right, hang on a second. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. People are starting to get on board. This is the first time that Clemson has scored 45 first-half points in consecutive games under Dabo Swinney to win 66-20 and 59-35 against Appalachian State and NC State, respectively, is pretty impressive. And that doesn't necessarily tell the whole story because the 20 points scored by Appalachian State, most of which came against reserves. And the same can be said about 35 points that NC State scored. Now, Clemson was up 28-0 in the first quarter, forced a couple turnovers. Cade Klubnik, I think, is playing his best football. And sometimes it just takes a little time, right? Like Cade Klubnik, as a young player last year, the expectations were sky high. And guess what? It's hard to play quarterback in the Power 5. It's hard. You got to be really good. You got to be really, really good. And even though you have talent, doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to have great production. Well, he's always had talent, but now he's starting to understand and see the bigger picture. So I've been very encouraged by what I've seen from him. I also think that he's more comfortable in Garrett Riley's offense. And I also think Garrett Riley is finally starting to say, you know what, forget about it, guys. We got good weapons. We're going to take our shots and let's just go after them. And it's really been impressive to watch. I think Clemson's going to be around. You look at their schedule. All right. Their toughest game remaining is probably Louisville at home. Maybe it's South Carolina with what South Carolina has defensively. Maybe it's at Florida State, even though I don't think that game's going to be as challenging as I would have told you it was going to be in the preseason. So there are a couple challenging games left. And you certainly don't want to get too far in front of you, but to think that you're going to lose at home feels unlikely. I think Clemson's lost like 2 games at home in 20 years or however many it's been. So they haven't lost a lot at home, that's for sure. But they also, on the road, I don't think it's too terribly difficult. Clemson might fast forward to the end of the year and they're 11-1 and heading to the ACC title to play against Miami. So I think Clemson, they got to keep winning impressively because they are going to need some style points in the event in which they don't win the ACC. But so far, so good in the response from the game and the outcome against Georgia in week number 1.